Hey, ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to or watching Susto, the podcast of paranormal folklore from Latin American and Hispanic cultures. Yes, you heard me right. This is another video episode. If you are signed up on Patreon, then you get episodes early and ad-free, and if you are a best ghoul friend, then you also have access to this video episode. It's just me here in my little dungeon. There's my little ghosty over here. Got the lights going on and you can see my horns in their full glory. So thank you for being here once again. And if this is your first time to the show, thank you for pulling up. Grab a rosary. It's not going to help you here, but it might make you feel better. I'm kidding. Ghoul friends, I am recording this pretty late at night. So I'm being very honest here with you, and I'm trying to keep the energy up, but it is about to be 10, which is my bedtime, but things have been hectic. I put the heck in hectic. So this was my chance tonight to record this episode and stay on schedule so that I'm not scrambling literally at the last minute to post this up. Thank you for your patience and for showing me grace and kindness as I push through and muster up all the energy, any energy that I have left in me for today. And to also, not only that, but to you all know, I've said this many times, I do not record or edit at night, but here we are. I'm trying not to imagine things in my peripheral vision. So you and me, we're locked in together. If you see anything, do not tell me. Again, this is my ghost friend right here. That is the only ghost allowed in this room, in this apartment, to be honest. So anyway, not too many updates. I do have a favor to ask you. I put a call out on social media and on Patreon. I want to do an episode and probably a video to go with it. Basically a Susto Q&A to get to know me a little better. I know that I pour my heart out on this show constantly, but if you would like to get to know me a little bit more and to officially introduce you all to my ghost writer, Jeff. You all have heard me mention Jeff many times, but I do want to give you the opportunity to get to know him better because now he is officially part of Susto. He is helping me research and write these stories. And yeah, if you all have any questions about him, us as a unit, like a working unit here on Susto, us as a couple, we've been together for 10 years this year now. Questions for me individually, just any questions that you have about Susto, about us, please feel free to send them in. I don't think you all would get too wild, but honestly, you've heard the things that I've said on this show, the things that I've shared. So what isn't left field or what really truly would be pushing that boundary? Why don't you test it? You send me an email, a DM. If you find the post on social media, comment it. I'll be posting it on stories again. We're going to be accepting a few more questions. We have some great ones already, but I want to give everybody the opportunity. So I was thinking, let me say this on the show itself so that everybody can hear it. So again, we'll be doing a Susto Q&A, which I'm thinking about making it an episode, of course, available to everybody. And then the video version, kind of like maybe vlog style interview. I don't know. It'll be something with Jeff and I, so that you all again can get to know me a little bit better, maybe if you'd like to, and to introduce you officially to Jeff. I keep motioning over here. This is Jeff right here, this little ghost pillow. That's him. But not really. Just pretend that he's here. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there because I'm very excited about the idea of doing that. It is going to happen, but I'm very excited about making it happen. Speaking of making things happen, let's make this episode happen. Before we do, I do want to give a kind of warning, listener discretion advised. Please always take care of yourselves. If you feel like you need to dip, this episode is not for you. I obviously completely understand, but I do want to give a heads up so that it doesn't catch you off guard that in this episode there are mentions of rape, abuse, and violence against women. So again, listener discretion advised. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode, which is the story of the Ex-Convento de Santa Mónica.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre,
a paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Like, sorry, like I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
In the heart of Puebla, Mexico, down an old cobblestone street, stands an unassuming building with high stone walls and heavy wooden doors. By day, it is a museum filled with sacred paintings, gilded crosses, and artifacts of faith. But by night, something else lingers, something that never left. For centuries, those walls held secrets. The cries of the tormented echo through the cold corridors. Shadows move where no one should be, and if you listen just closely enough, you might hear the whispered prayer of a long-dead nun still begging for salvation. This is the story of the Ex-Convento de Santa Mónica. Long before it became a convent, the building was something far darker. In 1609, a wealthy and devout woman named Doña Ursula de Vega established it as a house of confinement for women deemed unfit for society. Here, noble families sent their disobedient daughters, unwanted wives, and wayward young women to be reformed. Some had committed crimes. Others had simply spoken too freely, loved the wrong person, or disobeyed their fathers or patriarchs of the home. Once inside, they were locked away, forced into silence and prayer, their bodies and souls broken until they were deemed pure enough to return to the world, if they were ever allowed to leave at all. Murmurs of the reformatory's goings-on spread among the locals, tales of women who entered and were never seen again, of cries in the night, of graves dug beneath the floors. Around 1680, the house was repurposed into a convent by Dr. Manuel Fernandez de Santa Cruz, and the past was buried away, but the walls never forget. Now, an Augustinian Recollect convent, Santa Mónica became a place of prayer and devotion. The nuns lived in strict seclusion, sworn to a lifetime of silence and sacrifice. To the outside world, it was a sanctuary, but inside, something was rotting. Young women, many against their will, were forced into holy vows by their families. Some had known love before, only to have it ripped away and replaced with cold stone walls. Some dared to know pleasure, a carnal sin, and paid the price. The convent's leaders, tasked with preserving purity, took their roles to terrifying extremes. Nuns who spoke out were punished, locked away in dark isolation cells where some went mad. Those who showed weakness in their faith were given painful penances, from wearing spiked chains beneath their habits to whipping themselves bloody in the name of redemption. Some still, driven to despair, died by suicide, hanging from the rafters of their tiny chambers or flinging themselves from the convent's highest tower. And yet, these were not the worst of the convent's sins. In 1857, the Mexican government enacted the liberal reform laws, ordering the closure of all religious institutions. The nuns should have left, but they didn't. Instead, they sealed themselves inside, vanishing from the world, surviving in silence, believing that as long as they prayed, as long as they remained faithful, God would protect them. At first, the people of Puebla helped them, smuggling in food, medicine, and other supplies. But As the years stretched into decades, the outside world began to forget them. The convent became an echo, a faint memory. The Augustinian nuns were a contemplative order and did not sing, and in that silence, monsters flourished, and the women suffered. One of the nuns was only 16 when she arrived before the convent went into isolation, sent by her father to atone for a sin she never committed. The young nun dreamed of the world outside, of color and warmth and laughter, but inside Santa Mónica, the only warmth came from the candle flames at the altar. One night, the headmistress sent for her. A visitor had arrived, a priest who would visit the convent in secret, dressed in fine black robes, his face hidden by the flickering light. She was led into a candle-lit chamber and told to confess. The priest listened, and instead of offering absolution, his hand caressed her wrist. She could not protest. She was conditioned to submit to church leaders, no matter their requests. In her silence, the priest went beyond simply touching her wrist. For years, he came to the convent under the cover of darkness. The young nun was not the only one who suffered his advances, which betrayed his vows and destroyed the minds and bodies of the women in the convent. When the young nun's belly began to swell, the other nuns turned the other cheek, whispering prayers instead of offering solace. There was no pity in their eyes, only fear. A child born within those walls could not be allowed. One night, she was led away by an elder sister. Not all of the women who suffered in the convent were victims. Some were monsters in their own right. The elder sister was one of those monsters, a woman who believed that suffering was the path to salvation. When the convent fell into darkness, she did not despair. She thrived. She punished the weak. She silenced the disobedient. And when the young nun came to her with a belly too large to hide in her tunic, the elder sister led her to the well behind the convent. No one claims to know what happened, but they all heard the hollow splash, and the young nun never returned. By May 1934, the government raided the convent, expecting to find an abandoned ruin. Instead, they found nuns who had never set foot outside, women so pale they looked like ghosts, their fingers curled and gnarled from decades of clutching rosaries, and beneath the floors, they found bones. The first were small, infant bones, twisted and frail. Some were buried beneath the chapel, others hidden in the thick stone walls. Their skulls were cracked, as if they had not simply been laid to rest, but discarded. Then they found the women. Some had been walled up alive, skeletons frozen in the fetal position, their bones pressing against the inside of the bricks as if they had clawed at the stone until their final breath escaped their lungs. Others bore signs of violence, fractured skulls, shattered ribs, broken jaws. Some had chains still wrapped around their wrists and ankles, their bones locked in eternal penance. The most disturbing were the remains of pregnant women. Their bodies showed clear evidence of abuse. Some still had iron spikes pressed into their bones, a cruel form of atonement meant to purify their sins. In a single chamber, they found dozens. The walls were painted a rust color, not with frescoes, but with old, dried blood. Somewhere beneath the convent, hidden behind a stone wall, there is a room that no one speaks of. It was not meant for prayer or penance, rather for something sinister. Between the nuns who refused to obey and the infants who were never meant to live, no one knows how many bodies lie beneath the convent. No records exist of how many were found. The officials who oversaw the investigation kept silent. Today, the Ex-Convento de Santa Mónica is a religious art museum filled with relics of faith, golden altars, and portraits of nuns whose faces remain eerily lifelike. But something else remains. Visitors report disembodied voices in the corridors, murmuring prayers in an empty chapel. Some say they have felt cold hands brush against their shoulders or heard the quiet sobs of the many women trapped between worlds. Among these spirits is a figure in a blood-stained habit, sometimes seen near the well, rocking back and forth, muttering prayers that no one can understand. Some see a young nun that still walks the halls, her ghostly form clutching her stomach, singing lullabies to the child she was never allowed to hold. The most terrifying legend speaks of a crying nun, a spectral figure seen standing at a window, her veil soaked in blood. Some say she was a young woman forced into the convent, who died by suicide rather than bear the shame of her alleged sin. Visitors to the museum sometimes report hearing a soft scratching sound near the floorboards of the old dormitory. Some say it is just the wood settling. Others believe it is the unborn still trying to claw their way into this world. So, if you ever find yourself in Puebla, standing before the threshold of the Ex-Convento de Santa Mónica, ask yourself, do you dare step inside? Welcome back, ghoul friends. Okay, that one, I'm glad I gave that listener discretion kind of warning. That one was pretty intense, and this is a real place. These stories, these legends, they're stories and legends. So many of the things in this story, they're tall tales, they're rumors. So they're posted out there on the internet. Obviously, we're not just gonna, yes, sometimes we write stories, right? We make up stories, but this is one of those places that exists, and it has this really lurid kind of mysterious history, and people, went ahead and added their bits and pieces to it. I don't know. It's one of those where there's a lot of legend around it, and it's basically what I'm trying to say is it's unfounded. Many, if not all of these things have not been proven to be true. So it's one of those things that just kind of took a life of its own. Some of these things are true, however. So a note here from Jeff. He wrote some historical background about the liberal reform laws that led to the convent going secret. So this actually did happen. This was a place that it was a reformatory. So this was a place where they sent, quote, unsavory women to go get fixed, quote, right? Places that we know now existed, but were just terrible places where people were sent away. People were discarded basically for whatever reason, from real mental health issues to simply being inconvenient to somebody else, or being considered inconvenient because they weren't actually. But anyway, so this continues. The Catholic Church in Mexico had supported the French invasion of Mexico since they believed that it would bring the country closer to traditional Catholicism, as opposed to blending of Catholicism and indigenous practices that was happening in the country. Surprise, surprise. The church was like, yes, please, more colonization, bring it on, right? Instead of allowing this folk Catholicism, as I think we have learned to call it, letting that happen and bloom and be its own thing, they were like, nope, no room for that. Christianity, Catholicism only. So French people come over here and help us out, right? So this continues. So after supporting the first French invasion in the 1830s and the overthrow of the dictator Santa Anna, liberals in Mexico had a strong reaction. They crafted a constitution that put strict rules on churches and claimed property. It was a very anti-Catholic time in the country. So many churches went into hiding. This convent is one of the ones that went into hiding. Here's more information about La Reforma, or the liberal reform laws, and this is a Wikipedia link. So these reform laws that sent these churches into hiding. They took power away from the churches, I think essentially is what was happening. It's known, or this era is known as La Reforma. And this wiki entry says, in the history of Mexico, La Reforma, or the reform, or reform laws, refers to a pivotal set of laws including a new constitution that were enacted in the Second Federal Republic of Mexico during the 1850s after the plan of Ayutla overthrew the dictatorship of Santa Anna. They were intended as modernizing measures, social, political, and economic, aimed at undermining the traditional power of the Catholic Church and the army. I'm into these laws already, these reform laws. The reforms sought separation of church and state, equality before the law, and economic development. These anti-clerical laws were enacted in the Second Mexican Republic between 1855 and 1863, during the governments of Juan Alvarez, Ignacio Comonfort, and Benito Juarez. The laws also limited the ability of Catholic Church and indigenous communities from collectively holding land. Okay, pause. Give the indigenous communities their land. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay, so then this says the liberal government sought the revenues from the disentailment of church property, which could fund the civil war against Mexican conservatives and to broaden the base of property ownership in Mexico and encouraging private enterprise. Several of them were raised to constitutional status by the Constituent Congress that drafted the Liberal Constitution of 1857. Although the laws had a major impact on the Catholic Church in Mexico, liberal proponents were not opposed to the church as a spiritual institution, but rather sought a secular state and a society not dominated by religion. So I feel like generally I agree with that. Again, I have some hesitancy with the taking the land from indigenous communities, but it seems like I'm not trying to justify this, but what I'm getting from that is that they were just like, nope, clean slate, everybody's equal, it doesn't matter who you are. But then that's not actually equal then, because they're stealing this land from indigenous people. Anyway, so you get the idea. These reform laws were to take power from the church. And so that's why these churches had to go into hiding, right? You know, people were kind of turning their backs on the church, or maybe like being vehemently against it. And so they were like, okay, we gotta tone down the Catholicism, you know what I mean? So we have a couple links here that we're going to go through. This first one is from a adventures.abroad or adventures-abroad.com. It's a blog entry, and it's just generally about Puebla, Mexico. Again, all of these links, the direct links will be in the Susto Google Docs on Patreon. But on Adventures Abroad, they're, again, just talking about Puebla, Mexico. It's kind of like the history of Puebla. And let's see a little bit about it. It says, as noted in the introduction, Puebla is the only major Mexican city that was actually founded by the Spanish and not by the indigenous people already on site. Well, they didn't have to found it. They were already there. Okay, anyway, it says by 1530, it was apparent that Mexico City was going to be the capital and most important city in New Spain, as the Spanish named what is now Mexico and huge swaths of western United States. Veracruz was the Atlantic port that was the major entry and exit point for the colony. Puebla was founded in 1531 as a stopping point on the main road connecting Veracruz and Mexico City. As is often the case with cities founded by a religious order, as was Puebla, there is a certain amount of gobbledygook, that's what it says here, associated with why it was founded where it was. In Puebla's case, the Mexico City bishop supposedly had a dream of angels drawing out the outline of a city in a place of rivers and woods. He marched his minions out into the country, and when they found a place suitable for a new city because it had water and lumber, he knew this must be the place. Thus, the original name, Puebla de los Ángeles, or City of Angels. Thankfully, it eventually got shortened into just Puebla. One Los Angeles in North America is enough. Who wrote this? This is funny. Well, as I scroll to the bottom, there are also pictures here of, well, many places in Puebla, but they also talk about the Museo de Santa Mónica, or Museo de Arte Religioso de Santa Mónica. And here it says in 1857, Mexico adopted a new constitution that effectively nationalized all church property and ended its role as a political player, always on the side of conservative forces in the back and forth of Mexican politics since independence in 1821. However, the church did not stop its meddling and actively supported the two French attempts to take over Mexico. Pretends to be shocked. Eventually, most Mexicans were fed up, and they turned on the church and treated priests and nuns as subversive enemies. The shoe was now on the other foot, and the clergy were forced to go into hiding. Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory is based on one such priest in the province of Tabasco, and is well worth reading if you want to know more about the long and shaky relationship between church and state in Mexico. This continues, believe it or not, until 1934, the Museo de Santa Mónica was a secret convent where nuns lived behind closed walls, going about their business unbeknownst to outside authorities for decades. Today, it is the repository of a large number of religious artworks, as well as an example of how the nuns led their lives without anyone knowing they were there. That's really creepy, to be honest. I mean, like, there's nothing inherently creepy about it. They were just people, right? But that they were living in secret within the city and like they just went unnoticed for that long it's just weird to me that they're just there. But it wouldn't be weird because you didn't know that they were there, right? I don't know. This finishes up here. Some of the artwork was good. Okay, this is just this person's opinion because they went to go visit, and there's pictures of the art from there. Okay, at the very end, this says, many thanks again to Dale for his wonderful insights. Learn more about his adventures on the Maritime Explorer. So I guess the person that wrote this entry, their name is Dale, and this was published in May of 2019. So Dale, if you're out there, thank you for your contribution. The next source that we have here, this is from the CatholicTravelGuide.com. This is just a short entry. It says, during the persecution of Catholics in the early 20th century, most monasteries, convents, and churches were closed by the government. Okay, so they were forcefully closed. I was wrong earlier. Their very existence would put the occupants under immediate threat of death by the Mexican soldiers who massacred many during that period. So it was really that serious, okay? That this convent and its inhabitants survived is a bit of a miracle. Maybe divine intervention, you might say. This continues, the Augustinian nuns here were a contemplative order, I put this in the story, and did not sing, which certainly would have helped to hide their presence. A contemplative order, I looked this up, a contemplative order of nuns, it's nuns who worship through meditation and silence, like they're contemplative, right? So it's meditation, silence, a lot of that. It's not really like singing, proselytizing, like doing things out loud. This continues, yet there were those who surely knew and chose to remain silent rather than betray the sisters. So even local officials appear to have ignored them until one chose not to and had the convent raided. I guess it's not as creepy. They weren't really just kind of like lurking around and nobody knew. It was like an open secret. People knew, but they were like, whatever, they don't bother anybody. We're going to leave them alone. They're doing their own thing. This says, it was then discovered that several dozen nuns lived there. They were promptly expelled and the convent was closed. And then again today it talks about how it's a museum, wonderful glimpse into the past and how the nuns lived. And the next source that we have here, the next link, it is a lugares turísticos en Mexico.com. This is the Museum of Religious Art, Ex-Convento de Santa Mónica. And again, pictures here. It's a pretty place. I would go visit this for sure. It talks about it being a museum, of course. It says, the former convent of Santa Mónica is a 17th century building modified in later centuries, dominated by the Puebla Baroque style, which can be seen especially in the facades of the Patio de Profesas, covered with talavera tile and petatillo, which are bricks at an angle, like petate seams. However, the main facade on 18 Poniente Street is of neoclassical style. If we have any architecture heads out there, you tell us what this means. The museum reconstructs the life of the nuns through 23 permanent exhibition rooms and 2 courtyards, the professed and the novices. Again, more pictures of it. Here they talk about the legend. So again, it is said that the nuns and the women, this is where we hear some of these like rumors, these alleged stories. It says, the nuns and women who inhabited this religious space suffered abuse, rape, confinement, and inhumane punishments in order to inflict suffering related to the love of God or simply for not following religious norms. So it was either punishment or penance, right? Which I feel like are the same thing, but one is strictly devoted to like for the sake of religious enlightenment. I don't know exactly how to say that, but you get the idea. This continues, despite the beauty and history of the former convent of Santa Mónica, the stories hidden within its walls are quite dark. The legend goes back to the year 1609. Again, it said that Ursula Vega opened the house of confinement for women as a way to reform their behavior. Again, what we know now was behavior that probably didn't need to be reformed. They were simply just existing, and maybe, I don't know, people were like, that woman is too loud, she's too independent, she's too opinionated, something's wrong with her, send her away, right? And this says, well, not right, but that's kind of what the mentality may have been then. This continues, however, it also sheltered the Order of the Nuns of Santa Monica, and it was Dr. Manuel Fernandez de Santa Cruz who reformed this place in 1679. The dates were a little fuzzy. Jeff and I found different dates. I saw this one 1679, and he saw another one that said at like 1682, so I just rounded it out, evened it out to 1680, around there, to provide them with an equal space, including spaces such as oratories, a new church, and even cells. Cells or rooms? Cells is a very specific word. I don't know. This place was closed down by the government due to allegations of irregularities. It is said that the nuns and women who inhabited this religious space suffered, again, abuse, rape, confinement, inhumane punishments in order, for the love of God. In some areas of the former convent, skeletons of fetuses and even the skeleton of a woman who may have shown signs of pregnancy have been found. There's no source for this. I don't see any link for that. So I'm not sure how true that is, but this person is saying that there were remains found there. Workers and visitors have reported the appearance of a woman dressed in white in the dark and gloomy corridors of this facility. So again, lots of legend, lots of stories, but so far that's just what they are, stories, right? There's no we haven't seen any concrete, it was documented, this is, it was in the news, or I want to be very careful about this because this involves very sensitive topics. And if there are real people that were affected, like, you want to do your due diligence, and we're trying here. But again, it couldn't find anything that said, yes, for sure this happened. There's one that just it's like a quick promotion, like these are the hours of operation, but it's included here. It says, have you ever been inside an ancient convent? Are you interested in finding out more about the life of nuns and their secluded environment? At the Museo de Arte Religioso, you will have the chance to experience an extraordinary adventure into the hidden world of religious art and those who contributed to its existence. Home to the museum is the Ex-Convento Santa Monica, which will amaze you with its Baroque decorated entry, its kitchen, cells, and its 17th century temple. Open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Good to know in case you're there. I wonder when this was last updated, because maybe those are still the hours. But this is gpsmycity.com. Just a quick promo if you want to go visit the museum. The next one that we have here, this is a lugares.inah.gov.mx, and this is just Museo de Arte Religioso Ex-Convento de Santa Monica, and this is showing it like on the map. Oh, cool. And this is, it has a bunch of like pictures and stuff. So it's showing pictures of the permanent exhibition, collections, the spaces. This is really neat. And this is just mainly, it's a slideshow of pictures of this place. And again, they look really nice. Again, this is lugares.inah.gov.mx, and direct links will be in Patreon. But it looks really nice. The tiling is gorgeous on this like courtyard area. It's very well maintained. You can definitely see like the architecture styles and how they differ. It looks really, really cool. And the last one, this is a very, very long source entry, but it would be worth a read if you have the time for it. But this really delves into the depths of this place, and by I mean literal depth. This is from revista-liber or liber, liber.org, and this says news and legends surrounding the discovery of the convent of Santa Monica. And this is like about the full investigation. This is by Fernanda Melchor, or how would you say it in Spanish? I've only heard that pronounced Melchor, and I'm thinking of Tracy Melchor from Drag Race Canada, right? But this is by Fernanda, and when was this published? I don't see a date, but this is really cool. It's broken down into cool sections. So it talks about the search. So this says it happened on a Friday morning, May 18th, 1934. The first to notice the police's arrival were the residents of 18 Poniente Street. About a dozen gendarmes, I'm thinking maybe like that's like cops or something, accompanied by officials who said this was translated from English to Spanish, so I think that's why I don't recognize that word, but accompanied by officials who said they were representatives of the public prosecutor's office and the attorney general's office, entered the house marked with the number 103 and proceeded to evacuate its inhabitants to conduct a search inside the home. The adjoining house marked with the number 101 was also evacuated and searched throughout that day. There's a quote here: the convent of Santa Monica, hidden behind the facade facades of recently raided houses still served as a home for just over 20 Augustinian Recollect nuns. So just over 20, we have a closer number, who not only lived in the most complete and clandestine seclusion, but also hid in ghostly crypts and tunnels that extended beneath the streets of Puebla. A splendid treasure, it says. A splendid treasure indeed. This says, by nightfall, rumors were already spreading throughout Angelopolis. The police were replaced by a troop of army infantrymen who set up roadblocks and surrounded the entire block. Federal forces were concentrated on 16 Poniente Avenue, 3 Norte and 5 de Mayo streets, and even closed down the church located on the corner of 18 Poniente, famous and very popular for housing the miraculous Lord of Wonders. Apparently, it was rumored government agents had finally discovered what was an open secret in the neighborhood, that despite the strict laws that then prohibited the existence of convents and monasteries, Santa Mónica, hidden behind the facades of the recently raided houses, still served as a home for just over 20 Augustinian Recollect nuns, who not only lived in the most complete and clandestine, we read this part, seclusion, but also hid in crypts and ghostly tunnels that extended beneath the streets of Puebla. Again, a splendid treasure, it says. That is... See, now it's creepy again. I'm not going to read through all of the sections, but like part 2, it's titled The Mysterious Treasure. There was one that I scrolled by that I want to read. Part 3, A Mexican Sherlock Holmes, which I think is the name of the person that led the investigation. Valente Quintana's first nickname was El Zorro, or the Fox, due to his ingenuity and cunning in investigating and solving the most intricate criminal cases of his time, including the assassination of President-elect Álvaro Obregón, killed in July 1928 at the hands of the young religious fanatic José de León Toral. He was also in charge of the investigations that sought to solve the murder of Cuban student leader Juan Antonio Mella, who was shot in January 1929 while walking through the streets of Mexico City in the company of his partner, the artist Tina Modotti. The same year, Quintana would also discover the culprits of a railway attack intended to kill President Emilio Portes. And then there's this is like an etching. It says Sunday, May 20, 1934. Teléfono Hinojosa, representative of the attorney Emilio Portes, accompanied by representative of the Treasury Department and police officers into the hidden premises to proceed with its closure. This almost put an end to almost 250 years of female convent life. This looks like an etching. I think I'm going to post this picture because it's like this. To describe it to you, it's these two men in suits looking at, it looks like it's a shelf, but there's like maybe an opening behind it, and there's this nun just standing like between two shelves, like she's looking out at them, and it's black and white. It looks cool. Anyway, so this talks about Valente Quintana. Okay, here's the section I wanted to read, the secret passage. It's part 4. But right before that, it says, given this background, it is not surprising that Quintana was the one supposedly responsible for finding the secret door that led to the mysterious labyrinth of the convent of Santa Mónica in Puebla. It says the secret passage, but there are several versions of how Valente Quintana found that secret passage. Some sources claim that the discovery of the convent did not take place on May 18, 1934, but about a month earlier on April 3rd, when Inspector Quintana and a certain Florencio Gonzalez reported to the Attorney General's office the existence of several convents in Puebla that were still operating in different parts of the city, as well as the departure from the country of several valuable objects belonging to the nation. This report was ratified on May 17th before the public ministry agent assigned to Puebla, and in order to corroborate the existence of said convents, a series of searches were carried out, the first of which was carried out on May 18th in the houses marked with the numbers 103 and 101 of Avenida 18 Poniente, with the results that we already know. It is possible that Quintana had been sent by the federal government or commissioned by the Puebla government to discover the exact location of the illegal monasteries. On the one hand, the existence of these closures was an open secret in Puebla society. There were a large number of people who collaborated with the Augustinian nuns, performing various jobs and tasks for them. It is said that one of these collaborators, a certain Antonio C. Palacios, gained the nuns' trust and then betrayed them and reported the existence of the monastery to the Puebla Treasury Department. Damn, people really did not like the church at the time. I mean, these are country people, and the church was like inviting France to just come in and fuck shit up. So, I mean, I can see that they were like, fuck the church, we hate these people, we're gonna do what we can to like get rid of them. this continues. There is also another version that says that the informant and person responsible for the closure of the convent was an antique dealer who used to buy works of art from the nuns, and who, one day, furious because the prioress of the convent had demanded too high a price for an old painting, got too drunk in a bar and began to rant against the nuns and boast that he knew where the Santa Monica convent was. What a messy bitch. Oh my god. By chance, or perhaps thanks to his legendary cunning, Valente Quintana was present in that tavern. So yes, by that drunk person being there. And after questioning the merchant, he managed to extract from him the location of the convent and the secret device that allowed access to the passageway. Y'all, this is intense. I'm going to read this entire thing on my own time. I'm going to read one more piece of this. It says, other versions indicate that Quintana, commissioned to investigate the possible existence of the reported monastery, stood outside the church that houses the Lord of Wonders, where he saw that people were constantly entering, but that many of them did not come out again, which seemed suspicious to him. He then decided to enter the temple, and while snooping around there, he discovered a passage behind the altar. So it was connected to this other church. Oh my god. Okay, I know I said one word. This is the last paragraph I'm going to read. This says, it is also claimed that Quintana did discover the secret passageway on the day of the search of the house marked with the number 103 on 18th Street West. He was looking through a cupboard when he saw a painting that caught his attention next to a flower pot, and when he turned around, his trench coat got caught in the flower pot, where there was a hidden cord that rang a bell that served as a doorbell to communicate with the prioress of the convent, Sister Maria Guadalupe. The drama, y'all. She, thinking that it was a member of the family that lived in the house front, opened the door, but when she saw the detective's shoes, she tried to close it and ran to warn her fellow cloistered women that they had been discovered. This needs to be a movie. Has there been a movie about this? This is wild. I literally just got chills. This isn't even scary. This is drama. I want to see the limited series. I want to see the movie. I want to see the documentary. Wow. Okay, then just to give you the rest of these, part 5 is titled Brides of Christ. Part 6 is titled Defamatory Versions. This is probably where it talks about those things that happen. This says, I keep saying I'm not going to read it anymore, but you should come read the rest of this either way. But because this is talking specifically about, the lore and the legends that came out of this. This says, it is possible that after the discovery of the convent of Santa Monica, the collective memory of the city rediscovered, so to speak, traces of a mystical past that could no longer be reinterpreted except in the form of exuberant legends. When it was open to the public, now as a museum of sacred art, visitors were confronted with an incomprehensible world in which the colony and its Baroque customs seemed to be encapsulated. The pain and suffering that the Augustinian nuns used to voluntarily inflict on themselves in order to be pleasing in the eyes of God, for example, or the tradition of the Monicas of burying deceased nuns in shallow tombs that allowed the smell of putrefaction of the bodies to escape, were elements that intensified the already ominous atmosphere that was breathed inside the old and ruined monastery and gave rise to wild fantasies. Listen, I always want to be respectful of people's practices, especially religious practices, but this is self-inflicted punishment, so to speak, to spiritually lift yourself, to raise your ya. And one of those methods was to bury bodies in shallow graves to stink up the place. It is also possible that something of the unholy past of Santa Monica, after all, that building had served for several decades as a reformatory for, quote, lost and, quote, runaway women, persisted equally in the imagination of the people of Puebla, feeding some of the darkest legends of the convent. For example, that the building was used since colonial times as a kind of brothel, where the youngest and most beautiful nuns served to satisfy the base instincts of the priests and hierarchs of the city. It was also said that, until the very moment of its discovery, the place had served as a reformatory for girls of bad conduct who were locked up there by order of their parents. Many of these girls had supposedly ended up in the convent as punishment for having had extramarital sexual relations and having become pregnant, and it was the parents who decided whether the nuns should help the girl in childbirth or if they preferred that she be given some herbal concoction to help her abort. Even more lurid versions insisted on the discovery of hundreds of skulls of aborted children, and there was even talk of the discovery of the walled-up skeleton of a woman carrying a fetus in her womb. Oh my God. This is I think the closest we've gotten to like a real source. But again, this is saying that these are just kind of like, these are rumors essentially. But this is like, I think, closer to the core of it. It says, more serious was the fact that for many years, these gruesome and unfounded stories formed part of the information that the museum guides provided to visitors. Wow. So the official museum guides were perpetuating these stories, which again, are unfounded is what this is saying. In an amusing chronicle called Santa Mónica of Puebla, the Chilean archaeologist and folklorist Ricardo Lachem Cartwright, passing through the city during the 50s, recounts the unpleasant impression that a visit to the convent, by then already converted into the art museum, made on him, partly due to the neglect and deterioration in which the premises and its collections were found, but above all because of the childish complacency, in which, according to the chronicler, the, quote, the superstitiousness of the national temperament and the novelty in the popular imaginations, end quote, were mixed, that the museum visitors seemed to experience when listening to the lugubrious stories of ghostly nuns and aborted children told by the guides themselves. Yeah, so this guy was like, just kind of over it, how it was being delivered, and it was a bunch of like, as was mentioned by, what was his name, Dale earlier, it was a bunch of gobbledygook. That's the last of the sources that we have prepared for y'all here. Again, you check out that last one. I'm gonna read through this whole thing later. It's revista-liber.org, and it's just news and legends surrounding the discovery of the convent of Santa Mónica by Fernanda Melchor. Look it up. Thank you again, Fernanda. Welcome back, cool friends. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you so much to my co-ghostwriter and researcher, Jeffrey Doyle, for helping me produce this story. Once again, if you all have any burning questions, anything that you would like to know about myself, about Jeff, about both of us, about Susto, about podcasting, send your questions in. You can send them in an email, in a DM, comment on social media. You know how to reach me. You know how to find me. Summon me, use a Ouija board. But aside from that, you can get any and all updates about the show, not only by listening, but by following along on social media. That's at Susto Podcast on every single platform. If you want to hear your scary story on a Letters from the Beyond episode, you can send that to me by visiting linktr.ee/Susto Podcast or my website, sustopodcast.com, and using the official Letters from the Beyond form. On the website, it's going to say submit your story or something like that. And on the link tree, it'll also say submit your story or tell me a story. And yeah, you can type in your story there. If you have a picture, a video, audio recording, any multimedia, you can also use that form to send it in, and it'll be featured either on the show or on social media. If you would like to support the show, I always say it, the easiest way to do so is by continuing to listen, by sharing it with your ghoul friends and telling them that if they don't listen, a duende is going to bite each of their toes. It's going to be 10 nights in a row if they have all 10 toes. And if not, they'll find a way. They'll just repeat. And if not that, then make sure that you are subscribed, following, liking, leaving positive ratings and reviews. Thank you so much. Leaving comments on Spotify, just interacting with the show wherever you are listening. It means so much to me. It's the easiest way to support the show, and it's free. But if you would like to support Susto by way of duelers, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Susto Podcast, where you can get many perks like listening to this episode early and ad-free. At any level on Patreon, everybody gets that. And at most, you can get all the behind-the-scenes videos. You have the chance to watch this episode on video and many other videos. You also get like sneak peeks at things that I'm doing that are going on before anybody else sees them. I just posted something about a really fun interview that's coming up, so you can check it out there. That's all I'm going to say about that. But for now, major shout out to this episode's patrons. And you are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Dee, Josette, Sam, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Monica, Desiree C, Ashes, Neresa, Rachel, Azucena, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree A, Carla, Archer, Ricardo, Sarah, Vanessa, Maritza, Nieves, Monica, Iris, and Man Nirmal Kaur. Thank you all so much for your support. It means so much to me. It means the underworld to me. I will talk to you all in the next one, and until then, no te asustes. Bye.